have really nothing to gain by doing this. The more that I expose them, the larger target I become for them. But I'm already a gigantic target for them anyway, and I've dealt with this my entire life. And, you know, I know that not a lot of people are going to believe what I say, because the biggest question in their mind is, how did you survive all that? And I believe the simplest answer is because I lived long enough to warn you. But most people don't. Most people are oblivious right up until the point that they're dying. And that is what's so scary about it. These people are going underground. They're doing things in really roundabout ways. A lot of it is legitly underground. Even if you do suspect something of somebody. A lot of places, a lot of towns that you can live in, that they've got way too many of their own people involved in law enforcement, and even doctors and autopsists that can cover things up or can either push along a death or cover something up, you know. Doctors, autopsists, nurses and you know, figures of authority, they really go after jobs like that because either they have the merit in somebody's life or to cover it up, or both. And I've said that a lot. This takes a lot. What's happening right now takes a lot of recap, because what's happened decades ago has consecutively led up to what's happening now. So I do have to give you a bit of a background on just exactly who my family is, what they did and what they're still doing, and finally now it's basically come to a head where all this stuff is finally a lot of it is catching up to them. So bear with me, because I promise eventually it's going to come full circle. You need to know enough about them to know what kinds of things they've already gotten away with. If you've watched from the one that wouldn't die, if you've watched all those different episodes, which you probably haven't, but on the mere chance that you have, you'll know some of the things that I talk about, I've already talked about in some of those episodes. But I'm going to bring up some of the most important ones. I'm going to focus on the ones that law enforcement actually got involved in, because I believe those are the closest past brushes with fate that they have had, and still getting away from it. Okay. So I'm gonna talk about that in a second. Right now, what's happening right now? What might you ask is happening right now? The FBI is finally following my family. They actually arrested them temporarily, but they didn't have enough evidence to hold them without bond, and so they bailed out. I'm going to get into all of that and what happened with that in a minute, okay? And this, I promise you, is not a autobiography, okay? But you do have to know, because it doesn't make any sense otherwise, why they would treat me the way that they treat me, why they wouldn't instead just brainwash me to believe what they believe in. Okay, this is why. When I was born at a bad time, at least in their eyes. They believe in 1400s ideology. This ideology it wasn't birthed from the era of the Nazis. It was birthed 1,000 years ago or more. The witch hunts era was before that, before the Nazi era, and even before the witch hunt era. This ideology of kill everyone off that isn't exactly like you in the name of God type thing, and using fear to coerce people into um, into believing when they might otherwise not. You know, there's a lot of sinister people that are doing this just because they're sinister. Then there's a lot of people that they have recruited who are doing it out of fear or blind trust or something, okay? So like I said, you take into account that is their mindset when I'm born. 1400s, that is literally what they, okay? So I was born on the Devil's Day, which is night, late at night, or sorry, my mother went into labor late at night. I would have been born then, but because she was going into labor at that time, they automatically sought it to be a child of the devil. And basically what they did was they gave her something to prolong the labor, meaning that it would hush the labor, it would kind of dull down the labor and stop contractions so that I'd be stuck in the womb. Very early morning on the 11th was when I was actually pulled out. By all means, anyone should be dead by then. So the only reason why I was pulled out was because my mother, I'd shifted within the womb just enough to pain my mother. And she let out a scream. And her vitals were fading anyway because of everything that they were giving her. So she was fragile anyway. And to save her life, they pulled me out very forcibly, you know, not really caring, and it actually did some damage to my skull when they pulled me out with the forceps. When I came out, I had a red ring around my irises. And because of the red in my eyes, it was just all that more obvious that I was quite a devil child. A couple people in the room called it a miracle. My mother and father never said we saw it as a miracle. They only said that the doctors said it was a miracle. They never said we saw it as a miracle. That's just the way that people talk is a big indicative of their intent. My family was quite paranoid, so you know, they didn't need any more evidence, but throughout life they got it anyway. I was capable of some protection magic. I was capable of some visionary stuff, and they noticed it. I'm not the only person I've known that has turned pagan because of their abusive Abrahamic family. I actually know somebody, I met somebody that had a similar story, and she flat out fled the country that she was in so that she should get as far away from her family as possible. I won't get into that, but I'm trying to say is that is why they did not accept me, and it was a blessing in disguise because they never even attempted to let me in on these things. They wouldn't even let me know that they were part of this cult in the beginning. And sometimes they would even pretend as if they were, you know, on your side, and then they turn right around and abuse you again and hurt you again and punish you for just existing. You know, they taught me at a very young age that, you know, if they ever were nice to me, it wasn't genuine. It was only for reputation, and, you know, never to trust their true intentions, because at any second they could turn right around and for absolutely no reason, you know, just, I mean, there's so many things, you know, when it was bath time, I was told for my father to wash my hair, I was told to go under the water, and then he'd hold me there until I passed out, and then I would wake up coughing up water. And at the time, I just thought it was the way that you're supposed to wash your hair. And I remember him saying things like, if you would just hold still, this would all be over with. You're making it more difficult than it needs to be. My mother injected me with these needles a lot of times when I didn't even know it, but there was one time I was actually awake, and she, I think was getting fed up with the fact that I wasn't, responding to it as well as she wanted, and so I think she put a lot in me all at once. To this day, I don't know what it is, but it almost felt like a bee sting, and I was convinced that she brought a bee in there and stung me with it because I was a child and didn't know any better. As she was tucking me in, she pricked my leg with it, and next thing I know, I wake up in the hospital with a tube down my neck, and I'm choking on the tube that was meant to breathe for me, but now I'm choking on it because I'm, it's so they take that out, and they tell me that as long as I continue to breathe on my own, I don't need to have it back in, and I'm doing fine until my mother comes back, and I keep telling them, no, she did this to me, and no one listens, and every time she comes, I go unconscious, and I'll have the tube put back in. This goes on for about a week or so, and then finally, my granny comes to visit. She's one of the only ones that are not part of this cult, one of the only ones who are normal in the family. And she knows something's up. She does. And she just instinctively, when I say that my mother did this to me and that I don't trust her and that she needs to get away from me, she kind of springs into action, so to speak. I go unconscious again the next time I wake up, is in the drawer of the hospital morgue because they prematurely determined me dead. When I woke up, I kept telling the people that my family was going to kill me. They didn't believe me. But when I finally got home, they shoved me in my bedroom, wouldn't let me out except for maybe every 2-3 days to eat one meal, and once or twice a day to use the loo. My granny eventually came over, and I was told to stay in my bedroom, but I knew that it was that on the day that they were going to feed me, and I heard commotion, and the door was unlocked because they were about to let me out to feed me and let me use the loo. So they had just unlocked the door, and she comes in just randomly. They don't know she's coming, and if they knew she was coming, I'm sure the door would have been locked. I was able to go to the stairwell because I heard her voice and I didn't believe she was there. Why is she here? Like, she drove all the way across the country. It's a really long way. I just didn't, she doesn't do that. Normally, we visit her, she didn't come to visit us because, of course, she's old and she normally doesn't want to travel that far, understandable. So she is talking to them, and I hear, her, and I just, yell out, "Jojo." And then all of a sudden, Jojo gets really mad and she yells back at my mother and father, "You told me she was dead. I came to bring condolences and you told me she was dead." She storms up the stairs and sees me there, gives me a big bear hug and tells me that she promises she's going to come back, but she really needs to have a meeting with my mother and father first. That's exactly how she put it. And she goes back downstairs, and that meeting was a screaming match, like for 20 to 30 minutes long screaming match, okay? She leaves, and at that point I just think she lies to me. But in the middle of the night she comes back, and I think it's a dream. I wake up and she's standing there, and I think I'm dreaming, and she says, "No, you've got to be really, really quiet." She basically broke me out of their house, badass granny. She broke in, and then she broke me out of that house and rescued me and took me home to her house. 15 hours later, we finally arrive at her house. But by that time, my parents had reported, abduction or whatever. And she genuinely was just trying to save my life. She's on the phone with the police saying, can you at least arrest them for child abuse? And then she's talking about the needles, and she's talking about all these words I don't know what it means, like drugged, and things like that. And she's trying to get them to investigate about the needles. Eventually, finally, police do have to return me to them, but at the same time, they do, well, not at the same time, but several days later, they do get a search warrant for the needles. They find 2 spent needles, syringes, and test them, and it comes back unidentified compound. The unidentified compound, one lad the one that was really nice to me, gave me a teddy and things. He's the one that kind of interviewed me and asked me what was going on, and I think he genuinely was there to help. So that one police officer said, this is what unidentified compound means. I really want to investigate further what that might be, because it could be poison, it could be something like that. It could be some kind of medication that they gave you that, but it's something. And if we can figure out what that is, then you can live with your granny for the rest of your life and you never have to worry about them. He said, I have a daughter your age and I cannot imagine this, if it happened to my child. And he started crying. And like I said, he said, they will not let me investigate further. I said, well, why do you have to listen to them? Can't you just, you're a police officer, can't you just do it anyway? And the mindset of a child, I'm just like, why can't you? And he said, well, because he's my boss. And I'm pretty sure that his boss was in on it. His boss would not allow further evidence, because what does boss want to do? Boss probably is part of the cult, is trying to cover things up, but in such a way that it's believable. Boss wants to say, okay, here, look, we investigated this. It's not like we ignored the situation. We investigated this. We just didn't investigate it very good. So they cover in their ass, part of the COA production, and just enough to do that, but not enough to actually get a result out of it. The lad walked out in tears. I didn't understand. I was mad at him at the time. Poor lad, because he really did try to help me. And he legit couldn't do anything about it. It wasn't his fault. I just didn't understand at the time. So if you're out there, somebody, which you're probably not, if you ever watch this, now I understand. The time when I got shot at, my father I was just sitting on the floor, minding my own business. I remember literally just in my own little world, and he came up next to me and stood over me and had the gun pointed at me. I didn't even know what it was. My mother was talking about it's his new toy, his new favourite toy, and she was laughing and snickering in the background because she knew exactly what was about to happen. And he commands me to look up and say hello, and I say, well, why? I was one of those children that always needed to know why, and nothing could break my spirit. I still would ask those questions even though I know it'd get me in trouble. And he just kept yelling, and that he, if I didn't do it, then I'd be in really big trouble. So I finally looked up and said hello. He just kept saying that he needed me to look at him. And I think he wanted to see the expression on my face when he shot me. I think that's what it was. The bullet barely missed my heart, went out my back. It was left in me. The fragments were left in my arm. The bullet apparently did escape out my back, but there was bone fragments left in my back, and all of that got infected and it started pussing, And also there was one fragment in my arm they couldn't get out, and they kept saying, you know, if you don't sit still and stop complaining, we're going to leave it in. It's going to stay in there for life. And of course, I couldn't stop because it was too deeply embedded, and I kept flinching. And they said, okay, it's going to stay in there. Well, several days later, I thought it was going to stay in there for life, but my father overheard him talking on the phone, which he calling a lawyer, and that I need to shut up because he's talking to his lawyer, and that, you know, something about evidence is why he wanted me to understand that it's nothing that I'm being rewarded for. It's because of evidence. He took a lot of time, pain and time to explain to me, great pains to explain to me how I wasn't being either spared of anything, and most definitely not rewarded. That the only reason why he's going to get it out of my arm is because of evidence, and that his lawyer says so. And so, of course, I had no fucking clue what that meant, but they take me to a doctor that's in on it. What they don't realize is that the receptionist is, and this is a saving grace right here, because the receptionist apparently was a normal, regular person, and she called police. I remember the receptionist saying, you know, well, you know, even if it's a hit and run, you need to receive medical treatment right away. You know, this is now immensely infected, you know. And they told me to say hit and run, but they didn't tell me what it meant. And they told me, you know, as we walked into the doctor's office, as we were waiting on the nurse and things, they already knew that the receptionist was probably going to call police, and they told me if they asked me what happened, that I'd be in immense trouble if I told the truth. In fact, I'd be in trouble if I said anything other than hit and run. And to get me to remember it, sorry, there's a bug. To get me to remember it, stupid gnat. Okay, to get me to remember, because I was so young and tiniest attention span, my father kept over enunciating each word. Like, he kept dramaticizing each word, and he said it like this: hit and run, like that, over and over and over again, until the nurse came in. At that point, because I was a child, I was kind of saying it like he said it, because he told me to say it exactly like he said it, or I get in trouble. So when they ask me, when the police come in, you know, well, back up, okay? We'll get to that in a minute. The nurse comes in and looks me over, does some x-rays. The doctor finally gets the thing out of my arm, and I think that she's there to help me. So I ask her, can you get what's out of what's in my back? And she laughs and says, there's no bullets in your back. You're fine. Well, several weeks later, gigantic pieces of bone came out my back. It was part of why it was infected. She was not there to help me. She was just there to get out the evidence. She told me I was fine. So moving on. So after the doctor, you know, sees you, the police come in and shoo the doctor away. And I overhear them saying, "You're not in any trouble. We legally need to respond, but trust me, you're not in any trouble." And then they take them away into a separate room somewhere to ask them questions. Probably an empty exam room. I don't think they actually took them to the office. Okay, but anyway. So when they ask me what happened, I say it exactly like my father said it: hit and run, just like that. And they're going, okay, everything else this child says is normal. Why is she saying hit and run like that? They said, did your father ask you to do that? Did your mother ask you to do that? Did someone tell you to say that? And I said, I can't tell you, because if I tell you, because children are like this, they lie terribly. I can't tell you because if I tell you, then I'll get in trouble. And you're trying to trick me into saying it so that they can hurt me. That's exactly what I said. And they said, okay, listen, who shot you? Did mommy shoot you? Did daddy shoot you? And eventually, finally, one time I finally said daddy shot me. Now, that story about I'll get in trouble and me thinking that they are there to trick me into saying it, they said, okay, well, we just need you to confirm one more time. And I went back to hit and run. Okay, so if a child says that much about why they're not telling the truth, that should be enough to arrest them. They weren't arrested. In fact, one lady got really mad and impatient with me and started yelling at me. So some of them, I'm sure, wanted to justice, but a lot of them, I think, a lot of the police that came in were in on it. I know the police that interrogated my mother and father were in on it because of what they said. They said legitly, believe me, we're not going to arrest you. We just have to respond. You know, something like that. In the shooting of a child, the attempted murder, like I said, it barely missed my heart. And it barely missed all my vital organs. Just, you know, all these close brushes with police. And there's more, but that's all you need to know. You don't need to know every single one. I'm just telling you these kinds of examples so that you know. Those are two of the most profound ones, okay? They've gotten away with a lot of shit already. There was one time as a child that my father actually at least, because he's usually the one that does the things, and my mother is usually one that plots and plans, and she's kind of like the puppeteer that puppets the puppets, okay? So she's giving out orders and things behind the scenes, and my father's one of the ones that actually usually go out and does stuff. And so, you know, there's one time when I was a child that he actually very temporarily for a couple of weeks got in prison, but then they let him go because they determined that they got the wrong person or something. I'm not sure. There was a time where we went to a sugar house, and I do mean that literally. They were making maple syrup, and the lad took us out into the wilderness. It was beautiful, and explained about the healing properties of the trees. Well, that kind of when you talk about healing properties in nature and things like that, even when you talk about animal rights or preserving nature, if you talk about something like that to these people, that is a red flag. To the Abrahamic neo-Nazi cult, that kind of terminology is a red flag. If you're connected to nature at all in any way, they automatically think you're like a witch or something. And so, or at least practicing, you know, some kind of devil worship. I don't understand it, but that's what they believe. And it does have roots, okay? That belief does have some roots, because a long time ago when the witch hunts were happening, pagans were very connected to nature and the land. It makes a lot of sense. Any indigenous person also very connected to nature and the land. So I totally understand where that wild ass belief came up with, but that doesn't justify it at all, because there's nothing to. It's actually the opposite. If you're pagan, you've got the biggest rule is pure intention, and that you are there, you know, as an equal to nature, not above. Anyway, we'll move on to what they were doing. So all of a sudden, my father, and I remember it very well, he had a jacket, and something came out of the jacket, out of his hand, and I didn't know exactly what it was. He points it at the lad and tells him, you know, that he's going to do exactly what it says, he's going to shoot him. And I still didn't fully understand what it meant. You know, he said, you're going to stop this operation. You're going to, you know, basically shut it down. And anybody else that believes in these things, you're going to tell me who they are. If it sounds like an overreaction to you, it's because it is. He's that insane. My family is that insane. These people are that insane and paranoid. He demands that the lad, takes him back inside. They go back inside, and people start shooting at people. A lot of people hide in the back room. They pull me there in the back room, and eventually, I get back out because I hear something going on, and I just know that something bad's going on, and I want to help save somebody. One man alone can't do this. There was one man that went out and tried to help. I just knew something bad was happening, even though I didn't fully understand. And so I got up behind my father. There was these like metal table things. I don't even know how to explain it. Like a metal, bunch of them. I don't know what they were for, but they were a bunch of these little table things that I'm sure had something to do with the sugar house, and what they were used for, I'm not sure. But I jumped up on one of those, and I lunged and I tackled my father from behind twice. I did it twice. I was so little, he just flung me off. There's nothing I could do, and he didn't really take me that seriously. But it was enough time that the other lad had his gun pointing at my father. So now that if my father shoots, he'll shoot, and they'll both die. My father, the coward as he is, backs away and leaves, and he drags me with him. Then they say that they have to change the rental car, and they're very angry about it, and so I don't understand where the anger is coming from. And my mother screams at me, because it's because of you. We have to change it because of you. So apparently, whatever went wrong, they blamed on me. All those survivors, they blamed on me. People who could tell the story to the police, who could call police, they blamed it on me. Which I don't understand either. Because that's not my fault that you didn't succeed in your fucking evil mission. And they complained to the people that, something was wrong with the car, and they kept saying, hurry up, in a very angrily way. We got a new rental car and off we went. But police were called then. They're at least called, but they didn't actually catch up to us. There's so many close calls, and there's a lot of people that die within unexplainably, because they poisoned them within hours of them, leaving their house at some kind of dinner party or something, and they die within hours. Every single birthday, I had the same exact symptoms that these people died of. I'd get violently ill for several weeks, and it would sometimes be to the point where I was vomiting so fast, so profoundly, that I didn't have time to take in a breath. And so quite easily you could choke on your own vomit because you're vomiting the same time that you need to breathe. I mean, that is how bad it is. And before you vomit, your stomach literally, it's the worst pain that you've ever felt in your life. And it literally is swollen. I mean, you can feel it, you can see it, just how swollen it is. Whatever poison is some kind of acidic poison, I haven't figured it out. A normal day, I'd always feel a little sick. On a normal day, I didn't realize that they were poisoning my food and water until a long time later. But on my birthday, I mean, it was like near death sometimes, and they just blamed it on stomach bug. That I just happenstance on my birthday every time get it then. They just stop by my house when I leave or when I sleep. Several different ways that they can get poisoned through in the air, and actually there was a thing on this in the news about a lass got interviewed. She said something about this has happened in the past, I'm not surprised, and she said, but this is the first time that people have actually died from it. So apparently, she's well aware. She said her entire building is focusing, like stuff happens in her building a lot. She only lived there 4 years and she's already figured out that something not right here. Okay, and I'm thinking, wow, all their symptoms are really similar. Okay, what they felt like was really similar to what these people. What happened was, emergency responders went in not knowing anything, no hazmat, nothing, not protected at all, and just found 2 people unresponsive, tried to save their lives, but they were already dead. And then 30 minutes later, they started feeling the toxins. Sometimes it's a delayed effect, and sometimes you don't feel it until, especially if it's diffused like that, you don't feel it right away. And so a half hour later is when they felt it. They got hospitalized. It was bad enough that they got hospitalized because 2 people died and all the emergency responders are now hospitalized. They took this very seriously. It happened somewhere in New York, so if you want to look it up, New York, United States. And I believe, if not mistaken. And several weeks ago, I think this is what happened. And they evacuated all the flats in that building. You know, but they never were able to find out who did it, at least not yet. So what they'll do is, even if you think everything's locked, your landlord could open the key, come in. It could be your own landlord, anyone who has a key, or it could be that your flat has, you know, at the door, in the bottom of the door, you know, that there's a crack in the bottom of the door. It could be that they found a crack there, or it could be like this, the roof that I have, where there's essentially 2 roofs. It goes like that and then it levels off, and it goes, so there's 2 separate roofs to my house, and where the 2 roofs connect, there has to be a big gap. Okay, there has to be a pretty big gap because it's a cabin and the wood needs room to expand and contract. Otherwise, if that gap was not there, it would literally mess up the entire stability of the wall and the roof over time. So that gap legit needs to be there. You can't just take it away. But they know that that gap is there. And they at night, late at night, I could hear the air blowing in. If you don't hold your breath and you don't try to get that out of the house in time, this is what will happen. Initially, you'll feel like you cannot breathe, and then you'll pass out. If it's diffused enough, you might have a little more time. Initially, you might feel aching muscles, joints, and then feel a little tired, and then eventually feel like you're a little winded for no reason. Then you start to actually feel lightheaded. You might actually even feel, sometimes I've even felt sick to my stomach. Your heart starts racing. You literally feel like your head's inside a plastic bag and you cannot breathe. And then you pass out. The moment you start feeling odd, don't just trust that because there's no sign of entry that no one has been there, because they can pump it, like I said, through a door, they can pump it through the wall if it's a cabin like this, and they can most definitely get into the ductwork, get underneath the house and get into the ductwork and pump it through the ductwork. So, you know, some of these also, a delayed effect usually happens within 30 minutes to an hour after one of these types of poisons. You feel like a bunch of needles are piercing your skin. Usually it's the top of your hands and the top of your feet that it starts out first, and then if it's bad enough, it'll go to the rest of your body. Dozens of needles pricking you, that's what it feels like. That's because whatever you breathe in is literally damaging your nerve endings. You will feel that tingling sensation on and off probably for 2 to 4 weeks after you've left the source of exposure, because it takes time for your nerve endings to mend and to not feel that. So if you feel something like that and you know you're not diabetic or anything, that's the sign, especially if it's paired with shortness of breath or something. So You know, imagine if they're doing this to their own child, and also they're doing this to their own quote friends. I've seen time and time again where they try to befriend people in odd ways, and then people actually take them up on the offer, and then they end up dying years later. It's very suspiciously in the timing. They always die within hours to days after, and they at least get sick within hours after they visited my mother and father. A architect built one of their houses, the biggest house that they have, actually the house that they spend the most time in. And you know, he was in perfect health before all this happened. He is gay, and you know, he's one of the only gay people in the entire town, really, that are bold enough to be openly gay. And this poor man believed my parents when they started to befriend him. If someone is too nice to you, don't trust them. My parents insisted on him coming over to dinner and all these things, and he obliged to it. He brought his husband along, and you know, it's just no one would believe me. And then, what do you know? One night, everything they'd done this for years, and nothing happens, right? Because they were gaining the trust. And then all of a sudden, you know, and they'll tell you anything you want to hear. They'll tell you that they're advocates for this or that or whatever, just to ease your mind about it. They'll tell you that they accept you just to ease your mind about. And you go there so many times and nothing happens, and then all of a sudden, the lad dies. He gets violently ill. He's violently ill for several days. He finally goes to the hospital, and he dies. And when does he get violently ill? Hours after they served him food and water, or food and some kind of drink, liquor or whatever they served him. And that's not the first time something like that's happened to what they call a friend. The power stations, the substations. When I was a wee little child, my father dragged me to one of them, and I remember getting a really big vision. But if I said anything about visions, they reprimanded me severely. So I lied and said it was a dream, but that wasn't really any better. As we were at the substation, I just had this vision of everything exploding, and I just kept going like this. And my father just kept asking, "Why the fuck are you acting like that? You know, you have no reason to act like that." And I said, "Well, because I had a dream that everything was exploding and catching fire, and the lad that he was talking to, you know, was kind of taken aback by it." And my father says, "Well, trust me, we're not going to do it now. We're going to do it later." And I didn't trust it. I wanted to leave that place, and that's probably why I remember it so, because I was in fight or flight mode. That's probably the only reason why I remember this conversation he had with the lad. The lad was talking about something about, well, it's going to take about 10 years or maybe more, because we need to know which ones to hit. And if we hit the wrong ones, you know, then everybody will be out of power. But if we hit the right ones, then we can target which ones we want to hit without, you know, affecting anything else. But we don't know enough yet, and we need to know more. So fast forward 25 to 27 years later, and this plan actually gets put into action. Finally, it gets on the news. These substations are being hit. And not only is it not only is it a substation, but it is a certain substation. It is a substation that is quite known for being in a progressive town. Or it's a substation that is really nearby some kind of women's rights movement thing that's going on, or LGBTQ parade or something. And I have the luxury, because I was not ever accepted by them, I have the luxury of never trusting them. and knowing that the only true evil is my family. The only people who ever accepted me, actually, were people who were different like me. By the way, I'm gay. I really feel like a man trapped inside a woman's body, actually, is more like it. I'm even doing pagan rituals, and I've talked about it before, to try and connect more with the masculine side of me. Okay, I'm pagan. That should tell you something right there. And if you watch on my channel, you realize that, like, legitly, I couldn't just pretend to be pagan, not with everything that I'm doing, okay, and saying. And I'm not the only one I've known that, I've known other people with similar stories. So they have an abusive Abrahamic family, that their family sees in one way or another that they're born with magic, and they turn pagan. They're brought up, raised, very strict Christian, and they turn pagan because of how abusive their family is. And I'm one of those people. I hate to say it. I will tolerate Christians that, have an open mind. But I believe that Christianity in and of itself is evil. And I believe that, if you blindly follow it, it's one thing. If you don't realize just how selfish and greedy that Bible is, just say that, your species is more important than anything in nature, and that you own nature. The arrogance of that. No, everything owns itself. It fucking owns itself, including me. I own myself, but apparently they think they own me too. So I have immense rage, and if you're pagan, you can probably understand. If you've got enough of a third eye, you can probably understand that my eyes are not lying. That rage is real, and that sometimes that rage is out of control, I'll be honest. But it's against my family. It's never against anybody that's just sitting there minding their own business, doing nothing wrong. At least I know the difference between people who have actually hurt me and people who are truly innocent. And at least I have enough heart to not be blindly following somebody who just says not to trust an innocent person, or not to hang out with an innocent person, or whatever. At least I have enough sense to think for myself. And, everything they've told me has been a lie, so why would I listen to them? Anything nice they've done to me, they've only done it for their reputation. They turn right back around and start abusing me again. The only reason why, in the later part of my life, they were using poison in my food and water instead of physically abusing me, is because they realized that I was suspicious of them already, that I knew that they hated me already, and that they knew that I didn't trust them already. And as soon as I got old enough to remember, they stopped doing things that were obvious. However, there were times where, for a long time, PTSD and things, those memories weren't there. They were temporarily blocked. Not only was I really young, 4 or 5, sometimes even 3, but some of these memories, which you should remember at least at 4 or 5, for a long time I didn't, because of the PTSD. You can look that up, but basically you don't remember for a long time, and then all of a sudden you got these really immense flashbacks, and everything comes flooding to you like hell all at once. And that, at those moments, is when I was able to put 2 and 2 together. And I finally started remembering the early parts of my childhood that they thought I'd never remember. That is when I realized everything that was going on, and finally put 2 and 2 together about the poisoning, especially on my birthday. That was the really big clue, hint, whatever. So, I don't know, somewhere along the line they did something that attracted the attention of not local authorities but the FBI. I got a vision about that, and I thought, there's no way, you know, this is too good to be true. But then, a couple days after the vision, Mom and Dad were like telling me that, and by the way, I have to call them daily. If I don't, or at least answer the phone. If I don't, they come over here and threaten me. They threaten to evict me because this is technically theirs. I don't make enough money to have my own place. Even if I did, I have trackers in me, so they'd follow me regardless. But, you know, I live in one of the houses that they typically would rent out, and so, or do as a vacation home or something. And so, you know, they let me live here for free, but it's under their very strict control. And, you know, they think that if they can isolate me and they have more control, especially over my entire house, they can, like I said, put poison in the house and not have to worry about anyone else because I'm the only one who lives here. If I live with them, they couldn't do that. If I live with someone else, they couldn't do that. I hope to one day get free of this, but I cannot do it right now. And even if I wanted to, financially I can't. So, you know, pick your battles. If I can answer the phone once a day, that's a much lesser battle than them storming over here and threatening to take me to an insane asylum or something, or evict me or something. By the way, when they do threaten to evict me once, I said, okay, fine, I'd rather live out in the wilderness, I do not care. And then they switched to, clearly you're not thinking straight, we're going to take you to an insane asylum against your will, basically. You know, and let me be honest with you, not all of those places are genuine insane asylums. Some of those places, it's not an asylum at all. It's a concentration camp, basically. And if you take into one of those, good luck ever getting out. They think that actually I get too strong in those places. They, for whatever reason, which works in my favor, and so they think that they're the only ones that can do it right, so to speak. They're the only ones that know how to control me, and that is why they think that it's worse for me to live in a house all by myself, that they can control everything that happens, than for me to go to one of those facilities and somebody not know how big of a dose they need to poison me. See what I'm saying? That's their fucked up mindset. And every time they literally point the finger and say, you're the problem, you're what's wrong, you, and they just scream at me for hours. So it's much easier to answer the phone. So anyway, after that initial, they're calling me and saying, you know, we've seen a bunch of police around, have you seen that? Like everywhere we go. And I'm like, no, I haven't. Actually, I just went out and I didn't see anyone. I did hear some sirens, but I didn't see anyone. It's well, the police are everywhere. I'm like, no, they're not. So if they think the police are everywhere and I haven't seen one, I've heard sirens, but I hadn't actually seen one, that makes me think that the police are following them. A couple days later, they say that they've got some kind of big family friend gathering thing. They don't answer the phone at all. And remember, I still have to call them. It's very rare that they never respond or answer back. So when they don't answer, I know it's a really big fucking neo-Nazi something meeting that they're up to. Several days after that, we're going on a month-long vacation. Seriously. They send me pictures of their vacation, house, flat, whatever. But it's a different building each time they send me a picture. It's a different building. So I know they're moving around. They say they're at the beach, but I don't even know really if they're always going to be at a beach setting, to be honest. About a week to a week and a half after that, I kind of lost count exactly on the days. My mother says, something interesting happened to me. Well, anything like that she says like this, something interesting happened to me today. that's always some kind of sinister thing. She said the same thing when she killed her cousin. And what she did was that same kind of poison that they can put in the house, they can put in your car. He was logging, and he was on his way back home from logging, and he put that in his truck, and he passed out, and then as he passed out, the truck crashed, and it crashed on top of him. There was another crash a long time ago that was, I think, meant to kill both him and his son, but only his son got injured. And then eventually his son died of, they say, medical conditions, and then now he dies of another crash. They'll utilize anything. They'll do anything, fall down the stairs, crash, to simply just a, medical condition. They'll do anything. So anyway, to try and explain things away. And so she said something interesting happened to me, just like she did when she killed her cousin. And she said, all four of my tires, I was just going into the parking lot, and all four of my tires, just going to the post, and that's all I was doing, just going to the post office, and all of them, just, I couldn't see nothing, and, I thought maybe, it was something there, but I couldn't see nothing, so I just kept driving. Eventually, all of them went flat, and I had to call tow, and then that's why we were not answering for the entire day. I said, well, you had to walk home. How far did you have to walk? And she said, oh, only about 5-10 minutes. I said, well, okay. She said, well, okay, it's still not done, and it's going to be done in several days because they don't have the tires. They have to order the tires. And I'm like, okay, well, if someone has to order tires, they would tell you that in the beginning. They wouldn't make you wait all day long. You wouldn't be standing there just waiting all day long. They'd tell you front up. I know, because the same thing happened to me once, not for 4 tires, but for 1 tire that I had a flat in. And they, will tell you right up, okay, we have to order this, might as well go home and come back later. We'll call you when it's ready. So they were saying that they stay there anyway, all day long, like nothing better to do. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. And it's only 5-10 minutes to walk home. Also doesn't make any sense. So first they said it was because it took a while to walk home, but then they said it only take 5-10 minutes to walk home, and then it was because they're waiting on the vehicle. Now they're saying, a day later, that no, it wasn't all 4 tires, it was just 1 tire. And I asked a question about it, because she was saying, well, we think it hit a sharp curve or something. But I said, well, is there anything on the curve that looked like it was missing? They said no, and they said that they went back and looked and see, they couldn't find anything. And so I was like, okay, well, even so, that couldn't puncture all 4 tires. It'd just be 1 tire. So, oh, my mistake. It wasn't all 4, actually. It was just 1 tire, and they still had to replace all 4 tires. This is maybe where you get confused. They had to replace all 4 tires because in this particular model, it's just so stupid. In this particular model, if 1 tire goes, they have to put all new ones on all the perfectly good tires. There's 3 perfectly good tires. Why do you have to replace all 4? And by the way, yesterday you were telling me that all 4 tires got hit with something. Okay? Doesn't make any sense. Also doesn't make sense that you'd be in a parking lot when that happened. Spike strip. That's the only thing that makes sense, is a spike strip. Police obviously were following them before they went on this trip. Finally, police catch up to them. The FBI finally knows where they are after a week and a half of trying to trace where they are. They finally find them. They catch them with a spike strip. They take them to the jail, but they're only there for a short period of time. Why? Because whatever they're charging them with isn't enough to charge them without bond. So they have a bond, and someone fucking bails them out. Probably, no, absolutely being somebody belonging to the cult. Somebody bails them out. So I knew at this point that they're probably charged with something, but they got bail. They don't have enough information to charge them with, to hold them at the prison without bond. So they're still free. I just made me want to scream, but at the same time, I'm like, well, you know what? This is proof. This is proof that the FBI know not only what my family's done, but who they are, and they know that they're part of this domestic terrorist group, and they know that it's not just me now, it's other people that are involved in it. And if there's a bunch of people that are involved as victims, what I'm trying to say is it's there's too many suspicious deaths and illnesses hanging around people who are in proximity to my family. It's not just me anymore. It's just not just one person standing alone as a victim. You've got an entire community that's involved in strange things that are happening to them and no one knows why. And it all can be traced back to my family and other people in the cults that they belong to. And they're not just going after my family, they're going after anyone that they know is a part of this cult. Finally they realise that it's a domestic terrorism group, and finally they realise that they need to do something about it. I'm doing this to warn people, and I'm trying to, tell people anytime I have an update, anything like that, because I think when you tell people your own story, people realise just how real it becomes. I could just say, these people are out there, these people do this, be wary of them. But if I don't give you a reason to be wary of them, if I don't give you my own story to say, hey, this is what happened to me, if I don't explain it, a lot of people aren't even going to believe me. So the good news is that FBI is trying. The bad news is that I don't have high hopes that they'll ever get in prison for life. I think they're always going to get out of something somehow, somewhere. But at least they're trying. And maybe one day, but not anytime soon.